So this morning we very much focused on North Darwin, so NT cyclonic region construction issues. So chain of strength hold down in cyclonic conditions and raking under cyclonic conditions to make sure that our building doesn't topple over when the wind blows on it in elevation. But we can also look at some of the parts of construction that are national and still apply to us as well. And soil classification is very much a national phenomenon. So that report from Queensland has site class P. It's the same type of P as we might find here in Darwin. P for problematic. So in the NCC, you will find a whole section in part 3.1, site preparation. Chapter 1 is earthworks, Chapter 2 is drainage, and Chapter 3 is termite risk management. So earthworks is about changing the shape of the terrain. Drainage is about making sure it's not too wet. And then termite risk is pretty obvious. That's making sure that pests don't ruin your building once you put it in place. There's quite a bit of detail to be known about earthworks. It's a civil construction industry, so it's a little bit sideways or a little bit adjacent to what we know. There are some particularly strict rules about subsidence. So if you've got a steep block and you make changes, then you have to make sure that what you've changed doesn't come rushing down by mistake. We don't want that, particularly if it rains heavily. We also have to make sure that water can't build up in place, and we also have to make sure that the water doesn't run towards the building. So as long as the compaction of the finished product is adequate for the construction that you want to propose, and as long as the drainage of the site goes in the right direction, you'll probably be okay. What you do have to be careful of is excavating too close to construction or too close to services for existing and renovation, so we do have to be a little bit careful of that. This is kind of a combination between new and renovation because we're putting in new footings and then we're bringing in a renovation over the top, which is kind of unusual. So normally a renovation is where you have a building in place and you have to try and find a way to connect to that. One of the most challenging things about an extension is if the soil has changed or if you want to change the levels with the new construction and the old construction is on a different level or in different soil types or made of different construction, you might get movement between the two pieces, and that can be really, really tricky. So part of the reason why I know my poor neighbours are in such a pickle is because they would like to extend their original little home. But nobody will certify a structure attached to the structure they've got because it won't stop moving. And obviously having two pieces of construction together that move is a bad idea. So, hey? A rope bridge, yes, of course. What was I thinking? Why didn't I think of that? Or a trampoline or, you know, something like that. Just made it out of chewing gum. So what they'd need is a separate structure that perhaps had the appearance of being connected but did not in fact connect. The problem they've got is it's block work, so then the new construction would look completely different because it would have to be lightweight construction. Yeah, so David. What did they haven't extended. They built a shed separate to create more living space and some storage space, and then they built that according to the principles they should have built the official house in the first place. So a very lightweight construction with a slab that's disconnected between the footings and the actual floor slab. But they haven't been able to conquer the extension yet, but the extension, if they ever do one, will have to be lightweight construction, and their existing house is heavyweight construction, which is blockwork, and it's rendered and painted. So lightweight construction is framing with cladding, and cladding and blockwork don't look the same. You can get a product that is a board that you can render to look like blockwork, but they probably will just embrace the lightweight construction and make it a feature and, you know, contrast rather than try and look at the same. But you can get blue board that clads framing and then you can render that and paint it and it'll still look like rendered blockwork. Anyway, so that's the reason why I kind of know about this site so well, is because they asked me to look into an extension, and one of the difficulties is they'll move differently, and so you have to account for that. It can be quite difficult. So movement in soil, movement in your site has to be known in advance, predicted, and then accounted for in construction. In Western Australia, the soil is very sandy. So they have a testing technique where they have a big steel pipe and they bang it into the soil and they measure how far it goes down for each bang. So it's like a pentometer or something like that, the distance that it has to penetrate. So you've got to decide how far the sand goes down and things like that. So there's lots of unique factors around the country that you'd have to take into account. The closer you go to the beach, the more sand you're likely to encounter there as well. So you have to be kind of careful. Then there's rock, and rocky outcrops and cliff faces and split level blocks and things like that. So there can be all sorts of different terrain that you'll come across in your working career.
So what was their original problem? Was that they had the plans drawn up with the natural incline and then excavated it?
Essentially. So most drawings are built, most construction details, most construction here is designed to a Class S site rather than an A. So at worst, S, which is slightly reactive. Let me go to the table, see if I can find it reasonably quickly.
I hear a site class P and it says problematic.
Yeah.
I just said the alarm bell because problematic is like, oh.
Yeah, exactly. It probably means that there are different measurements, significantly different.
From one spot to another.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Site classification is in the footings and slabs, 3.2. And it's 3.2.4. Here we go.
Lisa?
Yeah.
Would I be right in saying that this is one of the trickier parts of the job, the specialisation of the knowledge and the variability?
A little tricky. All you need to know is that you need to know the site classification and you need to get a geotechnical report with a recommendation of what footing type you should use. So in the report that's coming around, you'll see there's a recommendation in there for what footing type you should use, and the geotechnical report that this neighbour got, it has a recommendation for the type of footing they should use in their extension. And for lightweight construction, you're looking at column and floor framing, or you're looking at a raft slab that moves together, which I'll explain in a minute. So these are our different options as far as site classification goes nationally. So this is not a Darwin thing, this is national. So A is mostly sand and rock sites with little or no ground movement from moisture changes. So A1, very stable, no movement, build whatever you want and it'll be okay. S is slightly reactive, so a little bit more movement. M is moderately reactive. H is highly reactive, so highly movable. E is extremely reactive, so that's the tough one. And then A to P are filled sites, so where you bring in your own dirt and then you compact it to any one of these levels. And then P is problematic sites, which include soft soils, soft clay, or silt or loose sands, landslip, mine subsidence, collapsing soils, soils subject to erosion, reactive sites subject to abnormal moisture conditions, or sites which cannot be classified otherwise. So there's just this big collection of everything that's a bit difficult to classify. So if you've got a range of different compactions in your site, you'll end up with a P classification. So the geotechnical report will let you know which one of these classes you're sitting with. The vast majority of sites in Darwin are Class S. So the vast majority of standard construction is built according to Class S. And most residential plans that you read, there'll be a note in the notes that says construction designed in accordance with Class S site class. So most of the construction that I'm going to show you or talk to you about is mostly dealing with a Class S site. That's just the most common one here. Now there are other parts of site preparation that we need to make sure of. I mentioned as well as earthworks, we have to make sure we take care of drainage as well. Let's just have a quick scan through earthworks before we get too carried away. So there's a couple of parameters that are considered normal conditions, under normal conditions, and I was talking a bit about that when I was saying, you know, the norm is class S. So things like being classified A, S, M, H or E. Moisture considerations on the site are a result of typical seasonal and climatic changes, and it's not subject to unusual moisture conditions caused by drains, dams, channels, ponds or tanks. That becomes outside the normal. Large trees have not recently been removed from the site. That would be outside the norm. Moisture conditions have not significantly modified by the removal of buildings or other structures. That might be outside the norm. Or that drainage has been maintained. So if drainage hasn't been maintained, it's been blocked and the site has been allowed to be inundated. I think for real estate purposes they call them seasonal billabongs around here. Yeah, so if that's unusual, then that would be outside the norm. There's some information about excavation to adjacent properties and adjacent buildings, and how to be careful that you don't change the soil conditions of an existing premises when you do excavation for your premises. So if you think about, you've got your nice little block, but you want to cut a big hole in it and build inside that, you're actually going to be changing the soil conditions of your adjacent lots if you're not careful, because all that structure is based on the integrity of the streetscape. So if you're going to pull a whole stack of earth away and change that site, then you might have to put in some reparations. It might mean putting some retaining walls up. It might mean piles, quite significant ones, to make sure that you don't have a cascading effect with soil coming in from the sides and then coming out from underneath. You ruin the foundation of the properties next door. Can't do that. That would be bad. So there's quite a bit of information about that. Again, this is civil engineering. Yep.
So in that instance, if you're going to excavate out the hillside, would it be better to get somebody in there to look at it first before you start?
Not better, mandatory.
Mandatory.
Oh yeah. You couldn't get a permit to excavate without it.
Oh, can't you just go and dig it out?
No. I don't think you can just go and dig it out, no. So you normally, for something really small like a retaining wall, like you were terracing a garden, you would still have to get a permit for that anyway.
Is there like a sort of depth there that you must get a permit? Like if you're only doing like half
So a metre is where balustrading kicks in.
Yeah.
So you would at the minimum need it at the metre high.
Yeah. So
but any time you build a wall,
yeah,
you have to have a permit.
But
retaining walls are regardless. I mean, if it was a 200 metre, step, a 200 mil step, probably you won't need a permit for that. But that's not a wall. Yeah. But if you build a footing and some construction, you need a permit.
So that could actually drag on for a period of time.
It absolutely does.
Because
Not could, will.
Yeah.
Getting out of the ground can take months
These
and a lot of money.
neighbours, using them as an example, if they had, say, a 2 metre drop off,
Yep.
they excavated that out, or one excavated out, like they should have.
Yep.
Then they have to get the permit, they have to get somebody to check it. Then they've got to do the excavation and put in a retaining wall or some.
And the drainage, yep.
So before they even get to putting their plans down, they could be 6 months.
And 30 grand. Yeah, that's why people like nice, flat blocks. Where's the fun though? So the alternative to removal, cut, that's called cut. You cut and take it away. The opposite is fill, where you bring it in. Now, if you've got a sloped site and you want a flat pad to build on, you can do both and take what you cut and put it where you fill. Yeah. And it's called cut and fill. Now, I won't go into any great detail about that. Beg your pardon? Yes, absolutely. So it would be a part of your permit to build. You wouldn't do it as a separate permit. You would simply just include it in the drawings, because you're going to need a retaining wall to hold the cut back beyond the building, however far back you put that. So I've got my block of land that I've bought. Here's the road. And my car. And here's the neighbour's fence. and then does whatever it does there.
So could you
That's my...
could you use retaining wall as part of the back end of the building?
You could, but there might be some drainage issues. So if you think about the amount of moisture that's in the earth behind a retaining wall, you do have to put drainage behind there, and I'll go into that in a second. You do have to put sufficient drainage behind a retaining wall so that it doesn't degrade the construction and weaken it and just make a bog and make everything unpleasant and retaining, damps and things like that. But to use a retaining wall as part of your construction, it's doable, but you have to waterproof things. You have to just be a bit more conscious of what you're dealing with on the inside. I would perhaps recommend having perhaps some waterproof membrane on the inside.
As well as waterproofing on the outside.
Of course. Yeah, of course. Yeah. So there's a risk to that. It's doable, but you'd have to manage that risk. So let's say I want to put my building here. That's my slab, my ground floor slab. I've got dirt where I want bedroom, and I've got no dirt where I want more bedroom. So I would just take this away and put it here. In an ideal world. Now, there's rules about what you can use for fill. This is fill. There's rules about the type of dirt you can use. There can't be any materials in that fill that will break down and leave a void. So if I have a tree stump that's here and it's got roots, and then I pick that up with my cut and I put it here in my fill, it will biodegrade and leave a big gap there and then leave a hole, and my stability will be gone. So there's rules about the dirt and how you use it, and typically, as you probably know, when you do cut, the volume seems to increase because it's not compacted. So you have to recompact it to get the same class site that you had before you ruined it. And that can take time. Now you can see here, I've got this lovely straight dirt here. Dirt doesn't do that, does it? You can't, it's not like sandcastles, you can't just ask it to stay there. So you're going to need either, depending on how tall it is, a footing that's very tall or a retaining wall there. So if it's less than 700 millimetres, you could just have a really tall footing, but if it's a little bit greater than that, then you need a full wall. Or you can simply, and if I had the room, slope that down, more dirt. Not always practical, it just depends on the space. Now we will do a project just like that in surveying. So just let that marinate until then. Just know that that's a thing. And then obviously you're going to need a retaining wall here. And you normally pop that up higher than the surface behind it, just to catch any inundation. And you've got to have drainage here, and then you have lots of porous dirt behind it. So you have a big pipe behind it, and this will have a footing that goes back here. So depending on how tall this is, determines how wide, how far back the footing comes.
So that force of the dirt
Yeah.
comes the wall forward.
Correct. And at worst, if you've got significant force coming down here, so this is a load, a settlement load that you'll discuss in the structures unit in 4005. If the force coming down here is significant, you might even have some vertical bracing that's perpendicular to the footing and the wall, like batters. Has anybody seen the old high school water tank up on Bullocky Point, and they have big pillions that come out? It's kind of the opposite to that. That would be water on the inside pushing out. This is earth on the inside pushing forward, but you get the idea. Like a brace. Pardon? Yeah. Is that right? All right. So that's fill. Cut and fill. The most important thing you have to remember is that changes the site classification, and it needs to be compacted and then retested. Because your footings still have to match what you have now, not what you had before, because you've changed it. For drainage, so for the earthworks there isn't a great deal to include on the report because we're not doing any cut and fill. We'll be digging holes in the ground to make our footings, but that's not really earthworks, that's just the footing construction. So we don't actually have any earthworks requirements.
Used for asbestos.
Yeah, as long as it wasn't used for asbestos. It could have been. Yeah.
It might have been lost before there.
Mm. All right, so drainage. Goodness, come back. So AS 3500, which is the plumbing code, takes care of the majority of drainage. We just have to do a little bit of thinking with regards to the fall of the land and making sure that we don't make things worse. This first note is about guttering and downpipes and controlling the rainwater. So when you think about a block of land that doesn't have anything built on it, when the rain falls, it simply sits on the soil and soaks in and goes into the water table. What we're doing by building a house is capturing all that rainwater on an impervious surface. So we have to figure out what we're going to do with it. Now, for residential buildings, and you'll see this here, the BCA does not require the installation of draining systems. Accordingly, requirements need only be applied when these systems are used. So depending on whether you have them or not determines whether this clause kicks in. There's no requirement for a mandatory guttering system in Class 1 and 10 buildings in the NT for the NCC or the planning scheme, except when the rule kicks in that you aren't to adversely affect adjacent lots. So if we've got a roof that is going to catch the rain and there's no guttering, and where the water comes off that roof is likely to affect the neighbours, we have to capture it and re-divert it elsewhere. So we are not allowed to inundate the neighbour's land with water runoff from our guttering system or water runoff from our roof system. We have to control the stormwater that we capture so that it doesn't bother anybody else. And everybody else is supposed to do the same thing too. So if you find that water is coming onto your property from the neighbours, you are entitled to contact the council and say, I'm having some problems with my neighbour's water. Can we do something? Yeah, so typically there's often gardens that changes things, and there's gardens that change things, built up rockeries and that. There can be issues here, driveways. Anything that's impervious is going to sheet water. Ideally, if you're capturing any water, it needs to go into the stormwater system or out to the road and into the stormwater system. Now, it's not wrong to allow your Class 1 and 10 stormwater to go onto the road. That's permitted. It's just not allowed to take pool water with it or chemicals. You're not supposed to clean paintbrushes in it or any of that stuff. We don't want nasty chemicals going into the stormwater system, but just genuine rainfall that comes off your property is allowed to sheet to the road. And then there's stormwater systems, they call them side entry points, you know, the stormwater drains in the side of the road, that will capture that water and shoot it away. But it goes straight to the ocean, so you've got to think about what's going down those drains. If you do choose to install guttering, then you've got to control it a different way. So obviously if you collect all the rainwater that comes off your roof through guttering and it comes down downpipes, where does it go then? Does it come out of the bottom of the downpipe, or are you going to put it into further pipes that are underground and then out to the stormwater system that way? Or are you going to let the water just sit on the ground and then go to the road that way? And it can be a lot of water. If you do dispose the water directly onto the ground beneath the downpipes, you probably want to have something like a concrete or a rock or something for that water to hit, because it'll dig a hole. It's a lot of water. And if you don't have enough slope that's fast enough, it will bank up and come back towards the house. So it's not a good idea to eject your downpipes straight onto the ground. If you're going to collect the rainwater, it's better to put it into PVC pipes under the ground and then connect into the stormwater system at the roadway from there. Your other option is to pop it out right at the curb, so the PVC can come out, and the side of the curb on the side of the road, you sometimes will see just a little opening, little round PVC opening. That's somebody's stormwater system that's then ejecting out onto the road rather than somewhere on the site. If you're unfortunate enough, if you're unfortunate enough to have a block that falls towards the back of the property instead of the front, which does happen occasionally, then you might need a big long drain. They call it an ag drain. It's just a big plastic pipe with a grate on the top, right down the back, and then it'll bring it all the way forward again. And the pipe under the ground has to fall forwards instead of backwards. Yeah, Josh?
Does this conversation explain why there's not a culture on gutters and ducts? It would strike me that you can't really manage the quantities that you get at certain times.
There are pros and cons to gutters or no gutters. So if you think about the water table, so we have a massive water table in the earth up here. And every time we capture something and send it to the ocean, it doesn't go into the water table. So it's actually better if as much of the rain goes to impervious ground. That's not very convenient sometimes. Like I said, you get inundation and get backflow and all sorts of stuff. So we can't always get it to the ground. So it's about being strategic and putting guttering in the right places and controlling it in the right way. So it is an expense, and if it's not mandatory, people just go, it rains here, get over it. So there's a bit of defiance there when it comes to managing your stormwater well. Compliance requirements from councils have stepped up over the last few years to really mandate better stormwater control. So typically for a compliance requirement for your planning, you'll need to show how you're managing the stormwater now. But in the old days, not so much. So thousands of houses have been built before compliance was really strict. And so they've just gone without guttering. So if you can manage the stormwater and get it into the ground, that's ideal, because then it goes into the water basin and is available for bores out in rural areas. They're really having to control the number of bores that are dropped because the water table is suffering. So if we have a bad wet season where there's not a great deal of rain, that can be a problem. But then we don't want inundation of our properties either. So we're in a fairly favourable position because our elevated house doesn't capture massive amounts of rain. It's a fairly moderate sized house. I think we said yesterday 150 square metres, and my little brain said to me, gosh, that's small. So it's not a huge capture area. We do have to protect the boundary where we're right up close to it with the bathroom. So we are already talking about guttering that particular area. And we'll just drop that to a downpipe that will eject onto the ground. I predict that that would be the most cost-effective way, and we would just have a little concrete splash pad. So make a note of that for your reports. So we're going to gutter the bathroom still. So we've got our truss overhang that's truncated. We've got a very short one. That's the bathroom wall. There's my bearer. Here's my recessed column and its footing. So we're going to have a gutter, typically 100 millimetres wide. It's taller at the back than at the front, so that if it does get too full, it can overflow out and not the other way. And it usually has little slots just here so water can drip out if it gets too full. It'll have a stopper that's only mid-height at each end. So again, if it gets too full, it doesn't overflow in the house, it stays out. And then it'll have a downpipe that'll go back to the wall, and it'll either go back into the column and down, or it'll come straight down, 6 one half than the other. And it has little brackets that fix it so that it doesn't flail around in the wind. And then you just want a little concrete splash pad for the water to hit when it comes out. The bathroom overhang adjacent to the south boundary. That's the minimum. Now I'd really like to leave the rest of the eaves ungutted and let the water hit the ground as nature intended it. We have plenty of lawn to water. It does make a bit of a creek where it lands, so we perhaps consider some gravel there to allow the water to still penetrate but not dig a hole in the dirt. That's just a landscaping thing. So on the other side, whoops, nope, we'll have the rain will fall directly here. And so we're suspecting something like gravel will take the weight of the rain and not dig a hole in the dirt, but still penetrate and go in. So we call this, let's just specify for now, 100 millimetre guttering and a 100 diameter. The symbol for diameter is a circle with a line through it, 100 diameter downpipe. And don't feel like you have to know how to do that yet, but there are ways that you can work this out. So if you're interested, let me know and I'll send you in the right direction. It's quite a process to determine how much rain for the amount of rainfall for the weather we get that's predicted, and how much guttering you need and how many downpipes you'll need to be able to do that. For this small width of bathroom, one downpipe is all we'll need. You don't have to have one at each end. So if I look at this eave in the other direction, so here's my ridge, here's my bathroom roof, and here's the edge of my truss, and my gutter is here all the way along, it will be ever so slightly fold in that direction towards my downpipe. Do you understand? The water needs to fall towards the downpipe. So you won't be able to see it visually, it's very minor, but it is there. And just to know, like 6 metres is about the most you could get out of a single downpipe, and then you want to start heading in the other direction. How wide is our toilet and bathroom?
1.5.
Long? Sorry, not wide, apologies. 1.5 is the width, you're right. How long will our guttering be, roughly? The bathroom and the toilet, 4.5. Any tops on? Let's have a bit of a look. I haven't got it in front of me. 2 and 9. Yeah, so about 3 metres. I think the bathroom is about 900 plus the 2 walls plus the 2 metres for the bathroom. So about 3 metres, so more than enough for one downpipe. That'll be fine.
Well, every 600 metres span you have to put it down.
6 metres, yeah, give or take, yeah. It varies. Depends on the sizes, but that's just a good rule to think about. When you think about downpipes, they can change the aesthetic of your building. So you don't want them right in front of the doorway. You can't put them on corners. They have to be able to fix. So I mentioned these little clasps. They're like if this is the downpipe in section and that's the wall, it's like a D clamp that fixes. Just like a fairly lightweight little steel clamp. You can get them that they are hidden and recessed. They go back here. They're not too bad either. But you've still got this white plastic, you can paint it, this white plastic pipe. You can colour it the same colour, you can paint it the same colour as the wall, but, you know, it's there. Some design. Flush them, recess them. You probably could. That would be a very fancy, a little bit more expensive, but doable. Through the planning, could be done, yeah. You see them inside columns quite a bit. You see them inside, for commercial premises, you might see, so for example, the library, we've got these 3 prongs that are holding up the roof. 2 of them might be structural and the other one's a downpipe, but you can't tell the difference. They look the same. So you can work it into the design, yep. Recess them, absolutely. You can make them a real contrast, make them stainless steel, again expensive but really nice. So there's lots of things you can do. But for our cost-effective one,
You've got square tiles, you could have a square downpipe.
you can have rectangular downpipes. You don't have to have circles, quite right. I'm going just for the most typical. So 100 mil guttering and 100 mil diameter downpipe, PVC. What does that stand for again? Polyvinyl chloride, excellent. Yep. Oh, UVPC, quite right, UPVC, unplasticized PVC. Is that right? Unplasticized polyvinyl chloride. It's rigid, it doesn't go all soft and mushy in the heat. What were you going to say?
UV lights and everything.
Quite right, quite right. Yeah. Excellent. Oh, really? So, drainage, moving right along. That's drainage requirements. And here we're just talking about excavation for drainage adjacent to footings. This is quite a common diagram that you'll see in the notes of residential drawings to help protect the integrity of the footing from excavation for services and just some of the distances that you need to stay away. So it's quite helpful. Again, it's a civil thing, but it's helpful to know and be aware of if you're trenching, just to stay away from the footing. So it's a minor example of what I was talking about, where if you were digging out an entire site adjacent to somebody else, that you would have to be careful of that as well.
So it's got a minimum, which is required.
Yeah, depending on the height of the trench. Got to get further away, the bigger the trench, obviously. Yeah. Surface water drainage. So for a slab on ground, finished ground level adjacent to buildings, you need an external finished surface surrounding the slab drained to move surface water away from the building and graded to give a slope of not less than, and then there's a few choices here, 25 millimetres over the first metre for buildings in low rainfall intensity areas, that's not us, and 50 millimetres over the first metre for the building in any other case. So make a note of that. Our ground has to be a minimum of 50 millimetres fall over the first metre away from our slab on ground area. So we do have a carport slab. They're not so worried about external slabs, but our laundry is downstairs as well. It's non-habitable, but it is a good idea to slope away. So we'll go away and then towards the road. We already have a slight fall towards the road naturally, so as long as we don't ruin that, we should be okay. So Clause 3.1.2.3, surface water drainage requires in Part A, 2, a 50 millimetre fall over the first metre from the building. So you can put that in your report and in your checklist and on your drawings. No problem. The next clause is about the height of that slab on ground. So not only does the soil have to drain away, but the finished floor level that you're stepping up to, typically for internal slabs, the step up has to be significant, because if the water does build up, even with that drainage away, our rainfall is quite intense. When it comes in sideways, it can pool. So you want to have a little bit of a buffer in case it starts to build up on the outside of your house so it doesn't get on the inside of your house. So here we've got slab on ground, finished slab heights. So the height of the slab on ground above external finished surfaces must not be less than, and this one's for low rainfall, 100 mil, that's not us, 50 for impermeable slope away from the building, that's not us, and 150 mil in any other case. So for our laundry, the internal finished floor slab height needs to be 150 millimetres higher than natural ground level outside. The carport can be 50. Now that's not the thickness of the concrete slab, that's just the height that it finishes above natural ground level. So I'll draw a little diagram for you. Diagrams are brilliant for this sort of stuff. It's 2 and 3, 2 for the carport and 3 the 150 mil for the carport, 150 for the laundry. So we've got natural ground level outside. I should draw that with a slight fall. It's reasonably imperceptible. 50 millimetres over a metre is not a very steep fall. So we've got a bit of a fall, and then we've got our carport slab. That's 50 millimetres, so that's 50. And then we've got our laundry internal finish floor here, and that one's 100 above the carport, but actually 150 above natural ground level. You see how that works?
There's a lot of places around that don't further that, isn't there?
Oh, look, sure. just my drawing. 50 mil. It's enough, it's decent. You appreciate it when it really rains.
But that's really from the middle.
Pardon?
Does that mean I'm stuck in the middle?
No, it's from the edge, from the slab down. Yeah.
Those units that I live in now, started built in 89, so finished in 89. That doesn't quite a bit.
Well, how many years has the groundwork's been mucked about with gardens, lawns? I mean, this is at construction.
Concrete is the driveway.
89, what were the rules back then, maybe? Yeah,
That's right.
yeah. So you have to be careful you don't judge.
And we flood.
Yeah, there you go. Yep. Now, the other part that you want to be aware of, and this is important, is the grading of ground underneath suspended floors. So this is a good image to snip into your report to explain that you don't want to create any ponding beneath your elevated house. Now, we're dealing with a laundry and an entertainment area, we've got carports. The likelihood that this will happen is pretty rare, it's pretty slim for us. But it is something to consider, something you would want to share with the design team in your report. So we're looking at still the same clause.
That should all be alleviated in the ground.
Absolutely, there shouldn't be any ponding. So surface water drainage, 3.1.2.3. We were already talking about the slab on ground adjacent, and now we're also just dealing with ground under the suspended slab. So you just want to prevent that. See the indication, it says fill to ensure water runoff under the building. You don't want anything collecting under there. And out in the rural properties where you might have an elevated house but you don't build in underneath, you might have equipment stored under there, the dogs might be under there, who knows, and they dig and things, and then you end up with a cavity, and then it starts to fill up with water, and then you get disasters. So,
In that case, we're putting a complete slab, so our ground prep should have taken care of it.
correct, yep, but we just want to highlight that that's not something we want to leave behind. Yeah, so it's another clause we're complying with. Now, this is a cool little diagram. I just want to share it with you, not because we necessarily need to advise our client of it for this, but should we decide to connect our stormwater system to the underground stormwater, I should have about said sewer then, should I want to connect my stormwater system to the underground stormwater system, we might have something like this that gives overflow an opportunity to happen in the right place rather than the wrong place. So you can imagine if you've ever lived on a street where in a storm the entire road floods and stays full of water for a reasonably large amount of time, for the duration of the storm, for example, and then it takes a few minutes or even half an hour or more to empty out at the end of the storm. That's because the stormwater system can't take away the water fast enough. So if you've got rain catchment and it's going down your downpipes and into a pipe and out to that same system, it's not going to go anywhere. It will just fill up and keep coming backwards until it gets to the top of your downpipe, and then it'll be up to your roof. I've never actually seen this in real life, but I suppose the physics add up. So it gets all the way to the top of the roof, it's back here, and then at best it needs to go this way, but at worst it can go this way. And if you've got lining here, it starts to fill up here as well, and we don't really want that. When it fills up here, then it gets back here, and then you've got it in your ceiling, and then it starts to come through into the house. Worst case scenario, that's a bit dramatic, but you get the idea. So if you put a sump like this, and this is for silt as well, but if you put this as a sump halfway, so say your house is on this side, on the high side, and it's coming through, and your pipe goes into this pit, and then it's got a low pipe out and it connects to the stormwater system lower on this side, but this is a drain, like a grate, then the water can overflow here instead of coming all the way back to your house and up to the top like I predicted it might. So it's just a sump. Now, again, there's no rule that says you have to have one of those, but if the rainfall, the catchment, the gutter size and the drainage and the slope is determined by the plumber to require one of these, then it behooves you to put one in. They're like a big black wheelie bin that you put in the ground. They're usually tiered. There's 3 of them, and you just punch a hole in one side for one pipe, and you punch a hole in the other side for the other pipe, and it's got a little grate over the top. They're usually plastic, so they don't warrant driving over or anything. You just put it to the side. On the way from the downpipe down to the stormwater, have a place that your stormwater can overflow. You might see them also a bit in commercial bitumised car parks, where it's drained to a central place and you've got a big steel grate, like those really big ones. That's the same sort of contraption, and then it takes the water away, but it's a big box so that it can overflow there, and the guttering from the shed or the warehouse or whatever plant rooms you've got goes into that same pit and then out to the stormwater. Sorry? Also good for retaining walls, yeah, quite right. At the top of the wall, you mean? Oh, at the bottom. As it's coming out. Yep. 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 Very good point. There's a bit of information here about stormwater drainage. We're just going to discharge to the ground the little pad, so it's not too big a drama, but it talks about the size of the UPVC stormwater pipes, the 100mm diameter, so same as the downpipe. And I've got a stormwater drainage plan I'll show you later. Termite risk management, the last of this chapter, 3.1.3. I think it basically says if you need termite prevention, get termite prevention. That's pretty much all it says, but let's have a quick look. Requirements for termite management system. The requirements of this part apply where a class 1 or 10 building is constructed in an area where subterranean termites are known to present a potential risk of attack, and a primary building element of a class 1 and 10 building is considered susceptible to termite attack. So if you have termites and you build something that's susceptible to attack, you should have a termite risk management plan. So that's a big old yes for us. So we definitely have to comply with this clauses 3.1.3. Just so you're aware, for the purposes of A, the primary building element consisting entirely of or a combination of any of the following materials is considered not subject to termite attack: steel, aluminium or other metals, concrete, masonry, fibre reinforced cement, naturally termite resistant in accordance with AS 3660.1 timber, and preserved treated in accordance with AS 3660.1 timber. But just hold the phone on that one. Just don't write that down just yet. There's a big old but coming. So just watch in the, where is it? I'm looking for our little NT exception. Oh, here we go. In the Northern Territory, delete that, just wipe that out of your memory, and replace with timber, naturally termite resistant timber, in accordance with Appendix C of AS 3660.1 in areas where Mastotermes darwiniensis, I think that's how it's pronounced, are not prevalent. So that naturally termite resistant timber is only where these guys aren't. And you can guess by the name, we are where they are. Are you with me? Did you follow that logic? So it only applies where these guys are not, and that's not us. We are where they are. I can't tell you, I can't say that again. Anybody else want to have a bit of a go? Mastotermes darwiniensis. I have a termite textbook I can show you if you want to read more about it. So there are some timbers out there that are naturally termite resistant. Termite's been around a lot longer than our buildings, and trees have been growing a long time. So they have developed a resistance, and I think it's got to do with the oils in them, but don't quote me. It's just not a common building material, so it doesn't really work out so well. Yeah, cypress is not bad. If you can get it, then it's not too expensive. So this is a terrific flowchart, always makes me laugh. So this is a flowchart for identifying if a termite management system is required. Is the building in a termite risk area? Yes. Are the primary building elements subject to termite attack? Yes. Then get a termite management system. It's a terrific flowchart, isn't it? If it's no termite management, you can't write this stuff. No termite management system is required. So it's a yes in all circumstances for us. So a termite management risk.
All circumstances.
Oh,
Just what do you think? When do you not need it? Steel.
yeah,
Concrete.
steel and concrete.
You've got no
Yep.
timber for them to eat.
But people still do it
Yeah.
because they've got timber in the roof, or they've got timber furniture, or they've just got a garden, or they've got wooden leg. And if you stood still a lot. If you had a wooden leg and you stood still a lot, that would be a problem.
Like the story of bear one under the nose.
That's right. Timber balustrading, timber furniture, timber anything. I've heard some awful stories about people storing furniture and equipment in a shed or a container, and they come back a couple of years later, and it looks terrific, like they eyeball it, they open it up, oh, no mold, yep, oh, looks good. Then they come to use it, and the termites have eaten it from the inside out, and it's just a shell.
That's what happened to our outdoor dining table. Beautiful round table with
Yep.
the,
Turned legs and the whole bit, yep.
metal framework. And when I put something, because we hadn't used it, and it was up the end of the deck, I put something on the top of the table and it just collapsed. It was just a shell.
Oops.
They'd gone through. They
Up the legs,
way,
yep.
Up the legs, through the
Yep,
deck, then
yep.
crept along through the, dug a hole through the centre of the
Yep.
deck,
Yep,
the purlins,
yep,
gone up across the floorboard.
I believe it.
Drilled holes in and make it go.
They'll go past concrete to get to timber, but if you don't give them enough timber, they'll eat the concrete if they have to.
Oh, and they came through my spare wheel tools.
Oh, jeez.
They also fly.
What?
Yeah, that's how they.
Yeah.
Do they?
My day,
Yeah, Queen Anne. Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, right. Oh, lordy.
You've got trees,
Yeah,
branches that are on the roof of your house. The termites get happy
Yeah.
to climb the trees and get into the roof.
yeah.
So do the rats.
Oh, well, yeah, that's a whole nother, yeah. What else have we got here? Another variation. So in the Northern Territory, delete 3.1.3.3D. What's that one? Oh, okay. And we have to insert this. So everything that's done for termite management risks is accordance with AS 3660.1. So put that on your report if it's not already there. Termite risk management in accordance with AS 3660.1. Achieving that is normally done with a chemical. You can get products that help create a barrier, so that damp-proof course that Sandra was talking about the other day that prevents moisture from getting into the slab that you build into the foundation, the soil. You can actually combine that. I think it's called Home Guard as a product. You can have that same damp-proof course also be a termite risk. You can also do something which is called an engineered slab. So the idea is that you make the slab vastly stronger so that it's much more impervious to termites. You don't see that very often, and you'll probably still spray the dirt before you put that down. But the most common way is to put a tube of poison in a hose around the perimeter of your building that has a little lid in the footpath around the outside of your house called the mowing strip. So it's the strip that you mow up against. There's a little lid and you can take it off, and there's a little cap in the hose, and you just fill it up once a year with poison, and it slightly seeps out of that hose all year round, just around the outside of your house. The purple hose, that's what, you're right, the purple hose. Has it? I couldn't give you a date. So they're talking about here a chemical treatment, and it has to be included in the pesticides register, and it has to be authorised, and then the pest management people put a long standing little ticket in your meter box to let you know how recently your inspection was done, how recent the pesticide was updated, and that's the sort of thing the certifier is looking for before they give you the permit to build. So you have to have had the ground sprayed before you pour the slab, and you have to have that the perimeter hose as well. Now, we're not necessarily going to have either of those two things. We might have the ground spray because it's just a good idea, but we're not going to have the perimeter because our house is quite elevated. So I didn't have it on my chain of strength diagram, but typically in the old days, if you want to call them that, on top of the concrete slab, you would just have a little steel tray that sort of goes around the around the top of the, it's like a little lid, and then the bearer would sit on top of that. And it's just curved down, and that's the termite cap. You can still see them at Bunnings. You can get them. Yeah, little ant caps. They can't walk upside down apparently. I'm sure they'll figure out a way, but slows them down at least. So we won't necessarily have that, but we've got our steel, and then we've got our steel bearer. And I guess the idea is that visual inspection on a pretty regular basis will help prevent termites from entering. But like Sandra said, if you've got nice shady trees that are reaching in over your roof, they don't need to go up the walls, they'll just go straight up the tree. It doesn't pay to have trees too close to the building. Cyclones, fires, termites. Shade's important though, so it's tricky. So when used as an external perimeter termite management system for those fancy termites we get, it has to be installed by excavating trenches, treating the exposed trench and backfilling the trench with treated material, and then covered by a concrete cover strip not less than 50 millimetres thick and 300 millimetres wide, measured from the external wall of the building. And we call that a mowing strip. So that's the dimension of it around a slab-on-ground property. Now we've got a carport slab around our laundry, so we're not necessarily looking at having a mowing strip. If the certifier requires it, we can have our termite perimeter underneath the carport slab. It's unusual, but something to consider. Does anybody have any questions about that? There's our notice about the durable notice, so that's the thing that goes in the meter box to make sure that it's got notice. A durable notice must be permanently fixed to the building in a prominent location, such as in a meter box or the like, indicating the termite management system used, the date of installation of the system, where a chemical is used, its life expectancy as listed in the authority's register, and the installer or manufacturer's recommendations for the scope and frequency of future inspections of termite activity. It's a serious business, this termite stuff. So there's the slab edge exposure, sheet material, granular material or chemical are the different systems that you might use. There's a whole career in termite management risk stuff up here, and plenty of money to be made.
Do you still have to have the footings sprayed?
The ground?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And get a certificate.
That's part of the certificate, yeah. So normally when you...
Even if we didn't put concrete slab underneath, we just done the footings.
You spray the footings, yeah, yeah. So you normally have to get a plan from the termite pest guys to get your permit to build. So there'll be a diagram of the site and where they're going to put the termite management plan in place. It has what? Terrific. That's why they called it what they did.
So would I be right in saying, similar to the discussion about 3.1 site preparation, this is also a bit of an outsource aspect of that job?
Correct. Absolutely. But just being aware that, yep. We're not out there physically doing the spraying, but we're specifying it as per AS 3660.1 on our floor plan if we've got the termite perimeter, and on our detail where we show it. So very quickly, I'm going for time, very quickly, if I was to detail the construction, I might suggest that the termite proofing will go in there. So this is my construction detail, my architectural detail, and I've got my step down, so I've got my mowing strip. This is for slab on ground construction, not the elevated one we're doing. So I've got my 50 by 300 minimum mowing strip. And I'll have walls, and I'll have render, and I'll have flooring, and I'll have skirting, all the things that you would expect to see in an architectural detail. And I might pop a little note here just saying termite management as per AS 3660.1. And then you have
the other aspect of that is that you show the mowing strip around the perimeter.
Yeah, that is important.
So you should be showing that in your site plan and you draw that.
This is a soil hatch, and just let's the builder know that that's what you're expecting. It's probably a bit close, so probably more likely to be about there. And then that hose goes all the way around the outside, and like I said, it has a little pop-up. So in somewhere in your mowing strip, you'll have a little plastic lid, and you can just take the top off, and there'll be a little cap in there. You just undo it. Not yourself, obviously. That's what you don't manage chemicals. Yep. You might have to dig it up and move it, relocate it, and fix it up. You don't really want it in the middle of your house.
No.
But you'd move it to the outside. The same as you might move some plumbing to the outside as well. Like if you have that ORG, the overflow relief gully we were talking about the other day, where you wanted to overflow outside the sewer system, you'd have to move that further if that was affected by your renovation.
So with this termite strip, is that coming into class 10 as well?
Not so much, no. But you would have to consider if your class 10 was attached to your class 1, how you are managing that.
Yeah.
So you would if it was connected.
Around.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So quite regularly, if you had a garage, for instance, you would put them on the mowing strip around.
Because it's connected.
And get in.
Yeah. Cool.
Gone are the days where you put shrubs right up against the house.
Little bit away. But as long as it's got the mowing strip, you're okay. Yeah. Yeah, just put a little note. There was a detail, I think. Was there a detail of the ground? No, maybe not. So perhaps on the ground floor plan, not the upstairs, but the ground floor plan. Is there one there? Yeah, so probably not there. Probably just on the ground floor plan. I would just write termite management plan as per NCC 3.1.3 and AS 3660.1. We definitely have to consider it because we do have timber framing and that's subject to termite risk, and we do live where those nasty ones live. Darwiniensis. Blah. I'm just going to stop the recording there so that all that earthwork, site class, termite stuff is in one recording, and then footings and slabs and things is in the next recording. Just trying to stop them from getting too long. The one yesterday, Sandra was slightly worried that was epic.
I got a month downloaded.
You did? Oh, well done.